Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16. As you know, Alabama and Georgia play this Saturday. We have already previewed the game. However, we are going to take a look at some things that could come out of this game. Win or lose for Alabama or Georgia, what's at stake beyond just this game. We're going to hop into what's ahead the rest of the year, which is schedules. And we're then going to look at ramifications for programs beyond that because this is a huge rivalry. Chase can't wait to dive into this one. Let's get into just your initial thoughts on the game.
I mean, this game is because you look at the way things are, and we'll get into this the kind of the playoff picture. I mean, this game, the winner or loser of this game we could see again. This is a game that we could see multiple of if you look at it in reality. Of maybe in the SEC championship, maybe in the playoffs. This is a game we could see more than once. But I think a lot of excitement is on this one because it is Kayla DeBoer's first SEC game. They played in the SEC championship game last year, and Alabama won that one. I mean, there's just so much excitement. And if you're planning to go to the game, you better leave now. Security will be pretty tough as former President Donald Trump will be there. And so I imagine that things will be pretty tight in Tuscaloosa. So plan on getting there early for that one because, I've been to some games in Tuscaloosa. I was at the Alabama-Texas game last year, and that atmosphere was crazy. And so I imagine this one will be as well. But certainly excited to see this game and two really storied, incredible programs.
Yeah, when a former president from New York attends a college football game in the South, that lets you know it's serious business. But let's talk about the schedules ahead. And by the way, rain might be a factor in this one too,
right?
With all the hurricane stuff. But let's look at the schedules the rest of the way. I'm going to have you pull up Alabama's first. We'll just go in alphabetical order because there's a disparity in schedules. And what this is the computer model that I run. And what you're looking at here is what that model predicted coming into games, the games that have been played, what the results were. And then on the far right, some of it's covered up what the actual line was. This is the line estimator that I run. It's based on FPI, SP Plus, and about Sagarin, a bunch of other computers. And it tells you what the line is likely going to look like. This one has got Alabama favored by about 4.2 points with the home field advantage. Now, the actual line of that is Georgia -2. So there's going to be just some discrepancies. But the bigger takeaway here is looking down the line at what the other lines will look like that. And the next toughest game after this one, I think Tennessee is going to be a toss-up. Alabama could be a slight underdog, as that is in Knoxville. I don't think Missouri is as good as we thought. That's showing Alabama by about 15. I wouldn't completely discount South Carolina, Auburn, LSU, and Oklahoma, but I don't know that Carolina's got enough offensive firepower, especially with the Norris Sellers hurt. Auburn, we know about that one right now, coming out of the loss to Arkansas. And then LSU and Oklahoma have had injuries to key players. I just don't think Oklahoma's got the firepower, although they got the defense. And LSU doesn't have the defense, I don't think, with Harold Perkins gone. So I think I wouldn't discount Alabama losing any of those completely, but I think it would be a little bit of a big surprise at this point. But here's the upshot of this, Chase. I feel like if Alabama loses this one, 10-2 is probably still your most likely record. It might be 11-1. That gets Alabama in the playoff either way.
Yeah, it does. And again, we're in this 12-team playoff world where you can lose a couple, one or two, and still be in the playoff. And especially if it's a loss to Georgia or Tennessee, who both of those teams most likely, barring something crazy happens, will also be in the college football playoff. And so, yeah, this is a game where there's not quite as much postseason implication on it. I feel like there could be again, but as we look at it right now, not a lot of postseason implication on this game. Maybe for a shot at the SEC championship, but not as much at the playoff.
Yeah, I feel like Alabama's kind of playing with house money coming into this one, that if it wins it, its chances of going to the playoff go sky high. If it loses it, okay, you're really not out anything yet because it's Georgia.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that in that sense, Kayla DeBoer and Alabama can take a deep breath and say this game is not going to keep us from doing anything that we want to do, any of our long-term goals. this game is not going to stop us from doing that.
Yeah. All right. Throw Georgia's schedule up here for a moment because, boy, there's a contrast here. Both of them played, neither schedule's easy, but Georgia's got murderous road trips after this to Texas and Ole Miss. It could be a small underdog in both those. I think Georgia's going to be the odds maker is going to lean a little bit more Georgia's direction than this model showed. We already saw there was a 6-point difference but between the two already. So keep that in mind. But the point is, these are murderous road trips that will be close games. Tennessee at home for Georgia. I think Georgia's going to be about a 4.5-point favorite as of right now, probably a little bit more given that series history. But point is, that's a tough game. I don't think there is for the rest of the games. I don't think Auburn could beat them, but it is a rivalry, not to the sense that Alabama-Auburn is, and Auburn is a weird team. Just when you think Auburn's going in the toilet, they show up and compete. Georgia Tech is a rivalry. Don't think they're good enough to beat them, but Florida State didn't think that either. I know we're comparing apples to oranges here, but just saying it is a rivalry game, just trying to touch on everything here. But the bottom line, I think if Georgia loses this one, 9-3 might be a reality. 8-4 is even a possibility. And I wouldn't go there. And I am kind of unpacking worst case scenario because it is a brutal schedule. You throw in an injury at the wrong spot there, although Georgia's deep. I don't know what happens if Carson Beck gets hurt. There's a scenario because of what is ahead that this could be a little dicey for Georgia, more than a little dicey.
Yeah, we talked about for Alabama, their goals are still ahead of them, win or lose this game. To me, it's a way tougher road for Georgia as we're looking at here. You see Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Those are 4 games. To me, Georgia has to win at least 2 of them. They have to win at least 2. I think Georgia could be a team that gets in with 3 losses to the playoff, but that's going to be hard. Your chances go down with 3 losses to me. Is it possible? Yes, especially given the teams and the fact that I think all 4 of these teams will be in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
But they need to win at least 2. You're way behind the 8 ball if you lose 3 of them. And I think they can. I don't think they'll win all 4. I really don't. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think they can go through this schedule unbeaten, beating all 4 of those. But I think they need to win at least 2. I think that's very vital for this Georgia team.
All right, before I have some thoughts on that, reminder, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff. Get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Bet online, the game starts here. Yeah, I think a 9-3 Georgia, if it got to that point, would be interesting because I think probably no program in college football has got more cachet than Georgia. And you're supposed to be looking at the resume, but you can't ignore what this program has been under Kirby Smart. It's been the premier program in college football the last 5 years. I think what happens, though, at that point, you start doing a lot of scoreboard watching on championship weekend
Right.
and hoping that, what you want at that point is Miami to resoundingly win the ACC. You don't want a Clemson sitting out there although Clemson would probably benefit Georgia since they beat them already in a head-to-head. But you start watching, the other leagues, the Big Ten. Does a Michigan make a late run and make a playoff push? You'd like to see Notre Dame lose somewhere else. I think it's hard for me to sit here and say it is or it isn't at 9-3 because there's just so much we don't know. And again, because of Georgia and perception. But it's a discussion I don't know that I thought we'd be having before the season. And maybe we look back and it was a stupid discussion. Maybe Georgia just goes full on Georgia and wipes the floor with everybody. But it is interesting.
It is, and I think that's a conversation we're going to be having every year to come in this 12-team playoff. Will these 3 losses, will they get in the playoff? That's just where we're at now. But, part of me thinks, well, can Georgia go through this schedule unbeaten? And I just keep coming back to it. The more I look at it, I don't think so. I think they'll lose at least 1, maybe 2. That's definitely a possibility. But, again, I think Georgia needs to win 2 of these tough 4 for the better shot at a good spot in the college football playoffs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at it, I mean, Georgia, a lot of pressure is on Georgia Saturday night in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and look, 10-2 gets them in the end of discussion. I don't
Right.
see
Yeah.
any way that does it. But that's when if you lose this one, and look, if you win this one, I think at that point I have a really hard time thinking Georgia doesn't make the playoff.
Right.
Because then you can lose at Ole Miss, you can lose at Texas, you get Tennessee at home, beat them, which is no given. But I think you get at least a pass on 2 more games from that point. So
Yeah.
all right, Alabama. I'm going to talk about longer term implications for programs and perception and recruiting. Let's start with Alabama again. I think it felt like the program has been in a wait and see pattern. I mean, you always, for lack of a better idea, bet on Alabama. And I thought Kalen DeBoer, and there were receipts on this from the day he was hired, I thought that was a fantastic hire. But we don't know yet. We can't bank wins till they've happened. And Alabama just lost the greatest college football coach of all time. Now, there were questions about Nick Saban. Was he behind the times? Was he not adapting? I mean, even if there was something to that, the guy got them to the playoff last year. So I think it was probably overblown. But here's the thing. You know a little bit about living in the state of Alabama. And if it goes a little bit wrong, it can go a lot wrong. If Alabama makes a playoff, I think the narrative is going to be Alabama still Alabama. But if they don't, the last time Alabama had an all-time great coach, the succession of guys that came after him lived in the shadow of that guy for, I don't know, a quarter of a century. Now, I think this is a better hire than the ones Alabama made after that, but it is a high-pressure environment. And it's not like that is a place where they're just like, yeah, we'll get them next year. No, every year you're supposed to be in the hunt. And so I think for Alabama, there's a lot at stake for them here long term.
And I think that's what makes this game so exciting for Alabama fans. I live in the state of Alabama. I do local radio in Alabama, and so I hear a lot from Alabama fans who I think Kayla DeBoer is a great hire. Some people may think differently or have different opinions, but I think why so many fans are so excited about this game for Alabama is because they get to see if Kalen DeBoer can win these big games, and I think he can. Like I think he's the guy who can do that over any of the other names, whether relevant or irrelevant, that were talked about when it came to replacing Nick Saban. But yeah, it's Alabama fans want to win and want to win immediately because that's what they're used to for the last 17 years. And so I think this is big for Kalen DeBoer, win or lose, to compete in this game, to have his team ready for this. And I think they are ready for this challenge. I think the team is made up of players who are ready to compete in a game like this. And so, but the perception around Alabama is, and it's the right one, that they got to win, and they're not happy if they don't win. And that's definitely going to be the case Saturday. And I can already hear the Alabama fans upset with Kalen DeBoer if they lose this game. But that's just that comes with the job at Alabama.
Well, if they start losing, the pressure is going to be there no matter what. But how much pressure is maybe off Alabama? Because what happens in that state is always relevant. You are always looking across the state if you're Alabama to Auburn and vice versa. And Auburn is in a little bit of a pickle as we speak. Now, they are recruiting really well. We will have to see if he keeps that together. Maybe that's a chance for Alabama to double up here. They win this game. It starts to go wrong at Auburn. Maybe you get the double boost of stealing some of those recruits. I think a couple have already flipped back and forth a couple of times. I'm just curious your thoughts on where does that dynamic of Auburn play into things for Alabama right now?
I don't think a ton. I mean, obviously, yeah, they play off of each other, and the other team's fan base always loves to see the other one go down. And yeah, recruiting is a big part of that. Obviously, you want to be the winning team because therefore you're going to get the best recruits. I think Ryan Williams is a good example of that. A guy from the state of Alabama was recruited by both, decommitted when Nick Saban was hired, and Kalen DeBoer was able to talk him back into it, telling him that this is going to be a winning program that you would join. And Ryan Williams is the best receiver for Alabama this year as a freshman. And so, the recruiting, I think, is the biggest thing when it comes to the two schools there. But I think Alabama's feeling good this year, and there's been questionable moments. Obviously, the South Florida game was one you kind of scratched your head through, and but I think that Alabama, just the vibe around Alabama is just excitement right now. And I
Yeah.
think Saturday, no matter what will happen, because of the 12-team playoff, I think there'll still be excitement, but I think it's just that they're excited. Alabama fans are excited right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Ryan Williams because probably the two biggest recruiting battles he's won were that in a roundabout way, Caden Proctor, getting him back after he spent a
Yep.
semester at Iowa,
Yep.
and they get him back. So, I mean, he did that before he'd won a game. You beat Georgia for Alabama, and you're in terrific shape, and maybe you are poised to start picking off guys from other places too.
You're right, and I thought that was big for, and even other recruits to see, like, hey, Ryan Williams, he was on the fence about Alabama after Nick Saban left, but DeBoer won him over, and yeah, Caden Proctor was won over by Kalen DeBoer and staff, and so I thought that was really big for Kalen DeBoer, and that shows, hey, he can recruit the South. For those who said, hey, he might not be able to recruit the South, Kalen DeBoer can.
Yeah. As for Georgia, and we are painting around the edges. We are talking about this is a Miss Universe contest where you have to look at little flaws and make determinations about what's next. If you want to go pessimistic, Georgia did make the playoff last year. Although I think if Georgia had been in it, could have won it. Wish we'd had
Absolutely.
the 12-team playoff last year. Boy, that would have been fun. But we didn't. And let's say that Georgia goes 9-3, 8-4, doesn't make it. This being one of those losses. Then you got a narrative. Well, Kirby had made the playoffs 2 years in a row. The discipline stuff probably stops popping in. And this is admittedly the worst case scenario. I'm not endorsing that this is a prediction of what's going to happen, but it's a pressure cooker in the SEC. You do wonder what happens if they lose a couple more, don't make the playoff. Now, I think they probably figure out a way to bounce back. But in the SEC, when you lose a couple games at these big time programs, it is panic time, and that would be a little interesting to see what happened if it played out like that.
Yeah, Alabama fans remind me a lot of Georgia fans. There's a lot of pressure to win, especially when you have been winning. And and I thought Georgia was one of the best four teams in the country last year. I thought they definitely could have won the national championship. They just happened to lose to Alabama in the SEC championship, which put them behind. But still, like, again, there's more pressure on Georgia, I feel like, to win this game, not only because of the schedule, and a lot of it has to do with the schedule, but yeah, you don't want to lose to Alabama again. Like, Georgia fans, of course, they beat Alabama in the national championship 21, but they lost in the SEC championship last year. They lost the SEC championship the year they ended up winning the national championship, but they're tired of losing to Alabama, and I know Kirby is probably tired of losing to Alabama too. But yeah, I think that may create more pressure also on Georgia to, hey, let's get the best of Alabama this time.
Yeah, well, and on the flip side, they win this one because Alabama's kind of owned this rivalry lately. And just when you thought last year they couldn't do what they did in Atlanta, then it's like, hey, wait a minute, the king is gone. We're back to our rightful place in the college football universe. We're the program that is going to be the standard bearer going forward. I think that at least in the moment, and look, things are never as good or as bad as they seem in the moment, or maybe not never, but rarely. But I mean, if Georgia wins this one, they're going to say, we went to Alabama. Last year was just a little blip. It's a fluke. We didn't make the playoff. We've been in, we could have won this thing. I think if Georgia wins, then they are back on top of the college football world in terms of not just this season and where that season's headed, but in terms of program perception. And it would be hard to argue that too.
Very hard to argue that. I think they will be. Like, this is I feel like and kind of because it's the first of those really four tough games for Georgia, but I feel like this is a big momentum game. Like, this is not only momentum for the rest of the year, but yeah, a kind of momentum for your program to get back up to the top of college football. So this is huge, the huge game this weekend for both teams, but to me, especially for Georgia.
Yeah, can't wait to see this one. It'll be the most anticipated game in the regular season that I can remember in a few years, I think. Although, again, I think the implications are downplayed. And this is what I like about the 14 playoff, or the 12 versus the 4, is you can stub your toe in some of these games and you're done. Now you're not. You get another chance. If you get an injury to a key player who misses a few weeks, you get him back, you get your chance in the playoffs. I think the whole system is great. I think in a lot of ways, the best times of college football, at least in terms of the competitive environment. Now, I've got some issues with how the sausage is made, and that's a whole other podcast. But I think the competitive environment this has created, and I like the fact that unlike last year, a loss alone does not qualify one of these two juggernauts from the playoff. And I think that's my favorite thing about this season and this game.
Yeah, and it is, and it elevates the excitement. I feel like, for sure.
All right, we have wrapped this up. We've got a preview of this game in depth. We do football, baseball, basketball year-round, literally year-round, even in the off-season and those other sports. Best way to get our content at the subscribe button. Hit the like button. That helps our analytics. And advertising inquiries. We do get an audience of millions every year. Caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. Hope you'll watch our recap of this game Saturday night later as we recap all SEC games. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You're watching Southeastern 16, presented by Bet Online.